Hi everyone, it's Chris DC Breaks here, and just passing through with a little bit of studio knowledge on the subject of Foley. Foley is something I've been using a lot in my tracks lately, and originally would come from the idea of using sound effects in TV and film to produce scenes that make sense. So people closing doors, and in fight scenes, kicks and punches and things like that being layered in post production to make them seem more realistic. So in music, I use Foley to basically provide some interesting sonic textures and really to fatten up drums, which are both really useful in drum and bass. So I've made a little groove here. What I did was to start with was to actually obviously make some effects myself. So I've recorded about 200 different sounds of stuff, which I've tried to keep quite sort of unusual. So it's things like snapping sticks, striking matches, my own body making weird noises, clicks and scrapes and all those kinds of things. And now I'm going to show you how you can actually use that to build a groove for a drum and bass tune. So I started out with an 808 kick. It's not something I would normally do, but it's just a nice basic sample that most people can get their hands on. It's a very subby kind of kick, a classic sounding kick. And as you can see from the analyzer, hitting around sort of 50 hertz or so. But not generally a lot within the 808 in the top end. And in drum and bass, you tend to need a bit more information in really the kind of mids and kind of highs with kicks to kind of help them poke out through the mix, because the mixes tend to be quite full on. So what I've done is I've actually layered in here a sample from my library, and what I would normally do is basically just load in a load of samples from my library into battery, so that you've got them on notes of the keyboard, and then you can obviously just program those and then obviously apply effects once they're in battery. So this kick, and that's just me obviously just going it's the same as that one, but obviously this one has loads of processing on it. It's been pitched down, it's got a volume envelope, pitch envelope, some saturation, a low pass filter, a bit more compression and so on. But if you look on the analyzer, that's hitting around 130, 140 hertz, whereas the 808 is hitting down here. So it's providing a bit more kind of body, as I would like to call it. And then here, and I've done this one in audio, this layer, because it's really about the transient on the kick, and I wanted to kind of be able to really zero in on the front end of the sound. And it's just a sample of me hitting my chest like that, close up to the microphone. It does have some low end information because it's a thump, but it also has a bit more of a click to it. And so that sounds like this. Really just, it's kind of probably more than anything caused a popping sound on the microphone, but it kind of works. And likewise with a book closing sample here in audio as well. I've just got a big fat book and closed it, and as you can see there's quite a lot of aggressive sort of information in the transient part of that, which is hitting, as I say, there's some low end there, but also a bit more information in the top end of the sound. So when you put all of those together, you get a bit more of a punchy, useful kick, as opposed to just may not sound like a lot, but later on that's going to make a big difference when it's in the mix, as it were. So that's one thing you can do, as I said, beefing up existing drums. The other thing you can do, of course, is to make some cool grooves. So here I have taken a battery again, and I've brought in a library, a folder from the library, which is all themed around stationery. So there's things like staplers in here. Some pencils being snapped, some scissors, staple guns, tape measures, that kind of thing. And without worrying too much about what the sounds actually are, I've just started programming a kind of a little groove in there, just so that I can kind of get a vibe going, really, more than anything. So that's what that sounds like, and when you have it with a kick, so you can hear now how the groove is starting to basically build up. Now this layer is pretty cool. This is an eggshell crush layer. That was literally me getting an egg and crushing it next to the microphone. It's set back off where the front end of the snare is going to be hitting, and it's really just to provide some crunch on the snare, as you will see later. Keeping the theme with food and drink. There's another layer here, again with battery. This is things like beer bottles being hit, crisp packets crunching, that kind of thing. And I've used the kind of crunchier sounds in that to make pretty much what shakers or something would normally do in a tune. And when you chuck that into the mix, this is just a bottle being hit. I think it was a Lipton iced tea. So these are kind of elements of the snare, really. And this is providing actually quite a lot of the texture to the snare. This is actually a match being struck sound effect. So if I bring that onto this, so I'm using two screens. So yeah, pretty cool sound, one that you probably haven't got in your library already, I would have thought. And obviously it's quite a quiet sound when you're striking a match next to a microphone, so I've had to boost the levels quite a lot. But it still has quite a cool sort of sonic texture to it. And I think with Foley, the big thing about it is the textures. You get a lot more kind of crispy, crunchy, cool little sounds basically that really help kind of make a groove kind of stick out. And you know, particularly if you're listening like in headphones, it's kind of, it just sort of almost tingles your ears with kind of interesting layers basically. So that's kind of what I like about it. This is some castanets, which is a, if you don't know, just like a Spanish wood instrument. There isn't a lot of instruments in my library because I wanted to keep it more effects based, but these had a pretty cool sound, quite useful for kind of providing clicky layers of percussion. And then all of that is basically layered, well, that's what it sounds like together. So you just hear the castanet providing a bit of roll going into the second snare. And then I've basically just put in here one of my existing snares, which has already been processed, which is what I tend to do when I'm writing tunes, just kind of use existing snares as a main kind of beefy layer, just to kind of get everything going right straight excuse me, straight away. If you like this snare, it's also available on our website, dcbreaks.com. But it is just a fairly, not particularly original, not particularly exciting 300 Hz Neurofunk snare, basically. So the other stuff gives it a bit more interest. And this, which I've labelled beard, I hope my beard doesn't sound like that, is in fact, it's not beard. I do have a sample of my beard being scratched in there, but it's not that. This is part of my wood section, and this is things like bamboo canes being split, strips of wood snapping, stuff being swished around and struck together and all that kind of good stuff. Again, unusual sounds you probably don't have in your existing sample banks. And it's just providing that crickly, crunchy texture I was talking about before. You have, hopefully, what is kind of like, I think the pattern's a bit boring maybe, but the effect is there of an interesting beat. So there you have it. And once you've got a beat to this stage, that's usually like half the battle with drum and bass, because then you can whack some chords in, a vocal sample, a sub, and you get a nice groove. So there you have it. I hope you found that informative and interesting. If, like me, you want to make your own Foley samples, please do. I'd encourage you to do that. If you don't have a really good microphone or a good dead room like I do to record it, or you just can't be bothered, you may purchase this from our website, dcbreaks.com/shop. Like I said, it's about 200 really good samples in there of Foley recorded here for you to use in your productions. So I hope you find that good and useful, and I will see you all very soon. Cheers.